So we ended up with our cleaned version of a discontinuous Galerkin formulation. And where we had introduced a couple of new domains, omega tilde, gamma, being our broken element or a broken domain volume and our mesh skeleton. And we had introduced these two new operators, the average and the jump. And this jump was a bit of an unintuitive definition that actually ended up cleaning a whole bunch of the mess with the pluses and minuses on different sides of element interfaces. And then we said, well, we have to choose now a numerical flux, and we want to have certain properties of this numerical flux. And these two properties are called the consistency and a flux is consistent and a flux is conservative. So how to choose the f hats, finally. And sadly, I'm still going to have to introduce 5 pluses and 5 minuses here. So we want them to be consistent and we want them to be conservative. What do these two terms mean? Conservative. Well, they have pretty straightforward definitions. So I'll write those down and then we're going to talk about what that means. The consistency definition is that f hat of phi, comma phi is going to be equal to f of phi. And the conservativity of a flux is, of a numerical flux, is the property that the jump of f is equal to 0. And we often call this a single valued flux. Okay, so why do we want to have these two properties? So let's first think about the consistency. And maybe you find this a very obvious property. Because what this is saying is that if our solution is actually single valued, right? So if we have a field phi that does not have a plus or a minus sign, but if it just has a single value on an edge, then our numerical flux, f hat, should equal our true flux, f, evaluated with that value. Yeah, so that is rather straightforwardly a property that's going to ensure that we had the same type of property for our residual-based stabilization methods, and that we want to make sure that the true solution actually satisfies the finite element formulation, and that was called variational consistency. And this also has to do with the same line of reasoning. Yeah? So a consistent flux is going to lead to a variationally consistent discontinuous Galerkin method. Which again means that if we actually were to obtain the true solution phi, well then it would satisfy our finite element formulation. And typically we don't obtain the true solutions, but we certainly don't want to develop methods that would not be satisfied by the true solution, right? So that's a rather intuitive notion. And actually more practically or more specifically, consistent methods are the ones that also converge. Yeah, and that also makes sense. If you don't have a consistent method, if your method is not satisfied by the true solution, then naturally, if you mesh refine, you won't converge to the true solution. Yeah, so precisely that is guaranteed by making sure that the numerical flux, the one with the hat, equals the true flux if we have a single valued solution field. Okay. Then the conservativity. Well, this one might be slightly less obvious. This is saying that the numerical flux evaluated on either side of our boundary is single valued. And that's going to guarantee that we have certain conservation properties in our solution. That if we solve our discontinuous Galerkin method, then that solution is going to satisfy certain conservation properties. And we can actually show this now with our cleaned up formulation. So assume that I have a flux that is conservative. Well, that actually simplifies our formulation yet again, because that means that this guy is equal to 0 and we're only left with this. So at that point I'm going to call the average of the flux f hat is simply going to be equal to, well, f hat. Yeah, I don't have to make the distinguish anymore. Okay. I feel like I'm skipping something. That's why I'm going a little slow here. Yeah. Okay, maybe I want to point this out. Of course, my flux evaluation, f hat, depends on, well, the values on both sides of the element. But I could also, for some strange reason, have a different flux definition on either side of the element, right? So you would also have an f plus or minus. And we'll actually see that some people have proposed this. So we have a plus or a minus, and that's why we can define a jump, right? And that's why the jump is not necessarily 0. That's why I felt like I was getting a little bit, felt like it was a bit sketchy of why the numerical flux might be 0 at all. So that's why that's what I'm trying to explain right now. So if we have a different flux definition on the one side of the element and the other side of the element, then you would have a non-zero jump. So a conservative flux is precisely a flux for which we do have a 0 jump, which means that, well, we don't have a distinguish between the plus and the minus side, and that's why I'm dropping that plus minus right here. Yeah? But we'll actually later on see examples of fluxes that are not conservative and do have different definitions on two sides of a boundary. Now, in principle, that's actually going to introduce these annoyances of having to take very good care about which element is the plus side and which element is the minus side. But we can actually still put those also into a framework that looks like our formulation right here. Yeah, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll see that when we see that. So what I want to talk about is why we're calling this a conservative flux. So why is this property so important for making our solution be conservative? So let me rewrite this equation, and then we're going to manipulate that a little bit. So now we have, again, integral of phi t v tilde minus f dotted phi dotted with the gradient of v plus, and this again also an integration over our broken domain, and then we have a single integration over our interface skeleton as, well, our single valued numerical flux. Multiplied by the jump of v, or dotted by the jump. Okay, so I know that once I have run my discontinuous Galerkin simulation and I have obtained a solution, then I know that my solution will satisfy this equation for all possible choices of test functions. For any possible choice of test function. So what I can do is I can take this equation, I'm going to say, well, apparently my solution phi is going to be satisfied for a test function that looks like this. Suppose that we have a mesh. And I'm going to choose my test function v to be equal to 1 inside one element and 0 in all other elements. Well, again, since my solution satisfies this equation for all possible choices v in our space, that means that it is also satisfied for this choice, where I have a 1 inside one element and zeros everywhere else. And I'm only allowed to make this, oh, no, I'll get back to that later. Okay, so suppose that we choose this function v, then what does this statement end up saying? Well, we have now an integral only on our element, right? Only on this single element. So we have an integral phi t time derivative, and well, it's going to be integral multiplied by 1, so I simply have the integral of that quantity. So how about the second term? Well, I have dotted with the gradient of v inside of the element. Well, the gradient of v is going to be 0 everywhere, so my second term cancels. How about my third term? Well, this third term, well, it's going to be 0 on all parts of our interface skeleton, right? Because everywhere my jump is 0 except for on the boundaries of this element. So I have an integral over the boundary of my elements, where the v on the one side is going to be equal to 0, and v on the other side is going to be equal to is not going to be equal to 0. So let's, at this point, I'll have to introduce again the sign. So I'll call this plus, this minus, and any one of these. So then we're left with f hat dot n plus v plus. And since now I'm only interested in a single set of elements, I'll actually drop these pluses. I'll simply say this is going to be true for every possible choice of element, because I can always set my test function equal to 1 at one element and 0 everywhere else. And this is precisely what our original conservation law was about, right? So this is saying, and actually this is equal to 0 as the final statement. This is saying that the time derivative of our total quantity of phi h is going to be equal to minus partial k f hat and sorry, v is equal to 1. So these terms. So. And that's precisely the conservation law that we started off with. Yeah. So, and we can only do this because of this this single valued nature of the flux function. Because if it wasn't single valued, we would have this other term right here. We would have some additional term that's going to hinge on the flux on both sides of the element. Yeah. So you would get a rather funny relation dictating the flow of phi, the way that phi is going to distribute. Yeah? But right now we have that the amount of phi, the time derivative of phi, the amount in which phi is going to change is going to be only equal to the flux through the boundary. And since we also know that we have a consistent flux, well, that's going to match up very nicely with how we want our partial differential equation to act, right? We're dealing with a hyperbolic conservation law, and this is precisely a conservation law set on one element. And that's satisfied in the case of a conservative flux, and that's why we're calling this a conservative flux, because now it satisfies the conservation law on each element. And one other thing that I think is very important to realize here is that we can only make this argument because of the discontinuous Galerkin method. Yeah, we would not be able to make this argument in a continuous Galerkin method because you cannot choose a test function that looks like this. Oh, that's the... Yeah. You cannot choose a continuous Galerkin test function that is 1 inside a single element and 0 everywhere else, right? This is a discontinuous test function. And, well, discontinuous functions are not in a continuous Galerkin method. Yeah, so at most in a continuous Galerkin method, you could choose a test function that's 1 at the node and then 0 everywhere else, but that means that it has a gradient here, a gradient here, a gradient here, a gradient here. It would be non-zero on each one of these elements. And you would get a very messy equality. And that equality would still be satisfied, but it wouldn't be a nice, clean-cut conservation equality like the one that we have right here. Okay, good. We made this argument before, but I'll reiterate this. The reason why we're calling this a conservation equality is not necessarily because of this equation itself, but it's because we can write the same equation not only on this element, but also on this element. And then we would see that whatever flows out of the one element is going to flow into the other element through this boundary. And again, that is precisely what would not be the case if we would also have this term. They would get some messy stuff in here. And that's going to not satisfy that whatever flows out of one element flows into the other element. Okay, and I think that's all I wanted to do for this video. So we haven't talked about what to actually choose for these flux functions, and we'll do that in the next video. But now we have an idea of what we want our flux functions to look like. We want them to be consistent, because that's going to ensure that we have convergence, that it behaves the way it should, very simply put. And we want it to be conservative, because that reflects the physics of our that makes sure that our discontinuous Galerkin method reflects the physics of our relevant partial differential equation. Okay, then I think that's it for this video. And in the next video, I'll actually prepare a bit of a table with different examples of numerical fluxes, and I'll also connect back to this and see if these are conservative and consistent or not. Okay, see you in the next video. Thank you for your attention.